Dust devils danced across the parched landscape, swirling red dirt against the bruised purple of a pre-dawn sky. Cole, his face etched with the grit of the trail and a lifetime of unspoken regrets, rode into Harmony Gulch. The town clung to the edge of existence like a lizard to a sun-baked rock, its few buildings hunched against the relentless desert wind. A single, flickering lamp in the saloon window was the only sign of life. He dismounted in front of the livery, the silence broken only by the creak of leather and the jingle of his spurs. The stable hand, a skinny kid with eyes too old for his face, shuffled out, chewing on a piece of straw. He eyed Cole and his dusty Appaloosa with a mixture of apathy and suspicion. Water and grain. Cole's voice was rough, like sandpaper on wood. And a stall. The kid nodded, taking the reins without a word. Cole watched as the boy led the horse away, then turned towards the saloon. The swinging doors, battered and scarred, seemed to sigh as he pushed them open. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and desperation. A few men, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats, nursed their drinks in silence. A woman with a face worn smooth by hardship wiped down the bar with a rag. Her movements were mechanical, her eyes distant. Cole took a seat at the bar, the wood rough beneath his calloused hands. The woman glanced at him, then poured a shot of whiskey without being asked. He nodded his thanks, the gesture barely perceptible. "Rough day?" The woman finally asked, her voice surprisingly soft. Cole just grunted, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He wasn't a man for idle chatter. Had seen too much, lost too much, to waste words on pleasantries. Passing through? She tried again. He took a long swallow of the whiskey, the burn of familiar comfort. "Looking for work," he finally said. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Not much call for cowboys around here. Unless you're good with a shovel." Gold's dried up, same as the rain. Cole shrugged. He wasn't picky. Work was work, and he needed to keep moving. Staying in one place too long brought back Ghost's head rather forget. Suddenly, the saloon doors burst open, letting in a gust of wind and two men. They were big, their faces flushed with anger, and their belts bristled with weapons. The other patrons shifted uneasily in their seats, their eyes darting towards Cole. The larger of the two men slammed his fist on the bar. "Where is she, Martha?" he roared, his voice echoing through the saloon. Martha, the barkeeper, flinched but stood her ground. "I told you, Caleb. Sarah ain't here." Caleb sneered. "Don't lie to me. I know she's hiding somewhere in this dust heap." He turned to his companion. "Find her, and bring her to me." The other man, a hulking brute with a scar that bisected his left eye, grunted and began to search the saloon, shoving patrons aside like rag dolls. A palpable tension filled the air, thick and suffocating. Cole watched, his hand resting casually on the butt of his revolver, a silent storm gathering in his eyes. He didn't know who Sarah was, or what she'd done, but something about the situation rubbed him the wrong way. He had a feeling this town, and this woman, were about to get a whole lot rougher. The brute, a man named Jeb, according to the hushed whispers rippling through the saloon, overturned tables, his boots crunching on broken glass. Fear thickened the air, choking the already strained breaths of the patrons. He stalked towards the back, towards a closed door that likely led to Martha's meager living quarters. Cole watched, his gaze steady, a knot tightening in his gut. He wasn't a man to interfere in other folks' business, but something about the raw desperation clinging to Martha, the way her hand trembled as she polished the already gleaming bar top, stirred a long dormant ember of protectiveness within him. Before Jeb reached the door, a commotion erupted from the street outside. Shouts, the panicked whinny of a horse, and the unmistakable crack of a whip sliced through the tense quiet. Jeb paused, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Caleb, his face contorted in a mask of fury, pushed past him and flung open the saloon doors. The scene that unfolded in the dusty street was one of pure chaos. A buckboard, its wheels spinning in the loose sand, was surrounded by a group of men, their faces obscured by bandanas. One of them, perched on a nervous stallion, lashed out with his whip, the leather whistling through the air. At the center of the chaos, a young woman, her hair the color of sun-bleached wheat, struggled to control a team of panicked horses. She was holding something close, a bundle wrapped in a faded shawl. Caleb roared, his voice laced with a venomous rage that chilled Cole to the bone. "Sarah, you ungrateful wretch! Get back here!" Sarah, her face pale but determined, fought to gain control of the reins. The whip cracked again, this time striking one of the horses across the flank. The animal reared, its terrified scream echoing through the gulch. The buckboard lurched violently, throwing Sarah off balance. She stumbled, the bundle she held flying from her arms. Cole acted before he even realized Head made a decision. He was on his feet, his revolver drawn, pushing through the crowd of stunned patrons. He burst through the saloon doors just as Sarah fell, her body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The bundle landed a few feet away, the shawl coming loose to reveal the small sleeping face of a baby. The bandit on horseback, emboldened by Sarah's fall, spurred his horse forward, intent on retrieving her. Cole raised his gun, his aim steady and true. A single shot rang out, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. The bandit's hat flew from his head, a neat hole punched through the crown. He reined in his horse, his eyes wide with surprise and fear. The other bandits, momentarily stunned, hesitated. Cole, his gaze cold and unwavering, stepped forward, his gun still trained on the bandits. "Leave," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. The bandits, sensing the shift in power, exchanged nervous glances. They knew a lost cause when they saw one. Without another word, they turned their horses and galloped away, disappearing into the swirling dust. Cole holstered his gun and walked toward Sarah, who was slowly sitting up, her hand pressed to her head. He knelt beside her, his expression unreadable. He picked up the baby, who had miraculously slept through the entire ordeal, and gently placed it back in Sarah's arms. "You all right?" he asked, his voice gruff, but laced with a concern he hadn't felt in years. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Across the street, in the doorway of a ramshackle building with a hand-painted sign reading clinic, a woman watched the scene unfold. She wore a simple dark dress, and her dark hair was pulled back severely, but her eyes, the color of warm honey, held a deep compassion. She held a small pale child in her arms, stroking its feverish forehead. Cole met her gaze, a flicker of something akin to recognition passing between them. He knew somehow that this woman, this Clara, held the key to more than just healing bodies. She held the key to healing the wounds of this broken town, and maybe, just maybe, the wounds of a broken man like himself. He helped Sarah to her feet, his hand lingering on her arm for a moment longer than necessary. She swayed, her legs unsteady. He nodded towards the clinic. "Get her inside," he said, his voice gentler than the desert wind. Sarah, clutching the baby close, stumbled towards the clinic. Clara met her at the door, her honey-colored eyes full of concern. She took the baby from Sarah's trembling arms and ushered them both inside. Cole watched them go, a strange tightness in his chest. He turned back to the saloon, the silence of the street broken only by the creak of the swinging doors. Inside, the air was still thick with tension. Caleb stood by the bar, his face a mask of fury. He glared at Cole, his eyes burning with hatred. "You interfered," Caleb spat, his voice dripping with venom. Cole shrugged, the gesture almost nonchalant. "They were leaving. They were mine," Caleb hissed, his hand hovering over the gun belt slung low on his hips. "She's got a child," Cole said, his voice flat. "Doesn't seem like the kind of life you'd offer." Caleb's face twisted in a sneer. "That child is payment for her husband's debts." A murmur rippled through the saloon. Some of the men shifted uneasily, avoiding Cole's gaze. Others, emboldened by Caleb's anger, began to close in, their faces hardening. Cole recognized the look in their eyes. Had seen it before. The look of men who enjoyed inflicting pain, who found pleasure in the suffering of others. "Debts get paid," Cole said, his voice low and dangerous. He met Caleb's gaze, a silent challenge passing between them. He knew he was outnumbered, but he wasn't afraid. Had faced worse odds, and had always walked away. Had always been alone. "Not by the likes of you," Caleb snarled. He lunged forward, his fist connecting with Cole's jaw. Cole staggered back, the taste of blood in his mouth. The fight was on. It was a brutal, chaotic melee. Fists flew, chairs were overturned, and the air filled with the grunts and curses of fighting men. Cole, despite being outnumbered, fought with a cold fury. His fists like hammers against bone and flesh. He landed a solid blow to Caleb's gut, sending him sprawling to the floor. But the others were relentless, their blows raining down on him like hail. He felt a sharp pain in his ribs, a sickening crunch as someone's boot connected with his side. He was falling, the world spinning around him, when a voice, calm and clear, cut through the chaos. "That's enough." The fighting stopped as abruptly as it had begun. All eyes turned towards the saloon doors, where Clara stood, her small frame radiating an unexpected authority. She held a small, cloth-wrapped bundle in her arms. "This isn't a place for violence," she said, her voice unwavering. "Especially not with a sick child in the room next door." She glanced at Cole, who was struggling to get to his feet, his face bruised and bloodied. Hez had enough. The men hesitated, their bloodlust momentarily forgotten. Clara's presence, her quiet strength, had diffused the tension in the room like a gentle rain on parched earth. Caleb, still winded from Cole's blow, glared at her. "Stay out of this, Clara," he growled. Clara met his gaze, her eyes unflinching. "This town needs healing, Caleb. Not more hate." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. The men, ashamed and humbled, began to disperse, their bravado replaced by a quiet shame. Caleb, defeated and humiliated, spat on the floor and stumbled out of the saloon. Clara walked towards Cole, her expression softening. She knelt beside him, her hand gently touching his bruised cheek. "You shouldn't have interfered," she said, her voice laced with concern. Cole looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and gratitude. "Someone had to," he whispered, his voice raspy. Clara smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Sometimes," she said, "silence is the loudest sound." The dust settled, leaving a gritty film on everything in Harmony Gulch. The saloon, usually a haven for the town's weary souls, remained eerily quiet. Martha, her face drawn and pale, swept up the broken glass, the rhythmic scrape of the broom against the wooden floor, a somber counterpoint to the silence. Cole, nursing a cracked rib and a split lip, sat hunched over a table in the corner, the remnants of a meal of beans and hardtack pushed aside. He watched Clara through the window of the clinic, her silhouette moving gently as she tended to the sick child and Sarah. A flicker of warmth, something he hadn't felt in years, stirred in his chest. A few days crawled by, slow and heavy like the desert heat. Cole, true to his word, found work. Not with a shovel, but mending fences for a rancher on the outskirts of town. The work was hard, the sun relentless, but it kept his mind occupied, kept the ghosts at bay. Head check on Sarah and the baby each evening, a silent nod exchanged with Clara across the dusty street. He learned the baby's name was Lily, and that Sarah's husband, a prospector, had died in a rock slide a few months prior, leaving her with nothing but debts and a broken heart. Caleb, the man who claimed her and Lily as payment, was a ruthless moneylender, known for his iron grip on the town's struggling inhabitants. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a grizzled prospector stumbled into the saloon, his eyes wide with excitement, his clothes torn and dirty. He babbled about a gold strike, a rich vein discovered high up in the treacherous Black Ridge Mountains. News, like wildfire in dry brush, spread through Harmony Gulch. Whispers of gold, of fortunes to be made, filled the air, replacing the oppressive silence of the previous days. Hope, fragile and tentative, flickered in the eyes of the townsfolk. Men who had long since given up on their dreams of striking it rich dusted off their picks and shovels, their hearts beating with a renewed sense of purpose. But along with hope came unease. The Black Ridge Mountains were known for their unpredictable weather, treacherous trails, and the whispers of something darker, something that lurked in the shadows of the peaks. Cole, sitting on the porch of the rancher's house, watched the townsfolk prepare for their journey. He saw the glint of greed in some eyes, the desperation in others. He felt a familiar pull, the lure of the unknown, the chance to escape the ghosts that haunted him. But he also saw the fear in Sarah's eyes as she watched the men depart. The same fear had seen in the eyes of countless others who chased the elusive promise of gold. He found Clara tending her small garden behind the clinic, the scent of herbs and wildflowers hanging heavy in the evening air. He stood silently for a moment, watching her work. "They're going to the Black Ridge," he finally said, his voice rough. Clara nodded, her gaze fixed on the small patch of green shed coaxed from the barren earth. "Gold fever," she said, her voice soft. "It's a disease." Cole grunted in agreement. He knew the allure of gold, the way it could twist men's minds, turn them into something they weren't. "Sarah's worried," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. Cole nodded. He knew Sarah was worried. She was worried about the men who were leaving, about the dangers they faced. But she was also worried about something else, something she hadn't spoken aloud. She was worried about Caleb and what he would do now that the men, his potential debtors, were gone. Cole looked up at the darkening sky, at the jagged silhouette of the Black Ridge Mountains against the horizon. He knew he should leave, ride away and never look back. But something kept him rooted to the spot. Something about this town, about this woman and her quiet strength, had gotten under his skin. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, a handbill tacked to the saloon door announced the formation of a wagon train bound for the Black Ridge. Cole, his decision made, saddled his horse. He wasn't going for gold. He was going for Sarah, for Lily, for the fragile piece Clara had brought to Harmony Gulch. He knew Caleb wouldn't leave them alone. He'd find a way to exact his payment, one way or another. He found Sarah packing a meager bag, her face etched with worry. Lily, oblivious to the tension, gurgled happily in her arms. "You're going?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Cole nodded. "I'm going. Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She saw something there, something beyond the gruff exterior, something that gave her a sliver of hope. Later that day, the wagon train assembled on the outskirts of town. A motley collection of wagons, buckboards, and horseback riders, all driven by the same desperate hope. Cole saw Clara amongst them, her small wagon piled high with medicinal herbs and supplies. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both headed into the unknown, bound by a shared purpose they hadn't yet fully understood. The journey was arduous. The trail, barely more than a rutted track, wound its way through canyons and across parched plains. The sun beat down mercilessly. The dust choked the air, and the nights were cold and unforgiving. The travelers, their initial enthusiasm tempered by the harsh realities of the journey, grew weary and irritable. Arguments flared, tempers frayed, and the fragile bonds of community began to unravel. Cole, despite his solitary nature, found himself drawn into Clara's orbit. She moved amongst the travelers, tending to their ailments, offering words of comfort and encouragement. She was a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape, her quiet strength a balm to their weary souls. One evening, as the wagon train camped beside a stagnant waterhole, a young boy fell ill. His fever spiked, his breathing shallow and labored. Panic rippled through the camp. The other travelers, fearing contagion, kept their distance. Clara, her face etched with concern, worked tirelessly through the night, applying poultices, whispering prayers, and battling the relentless grip of the fever. Cole watched her, his admiration growing with each passing hour. He saw the toll the journey was taking on her, the weariness in her eyes, the lines of exhaustion around her mouth. He found himself wanting to protect her, to shield her from the harsh realities of the world. As dawn broke, the boy's fever finally subsided. He opened his eyes, his weak smile a testament to Clara's skill and unwavering care. Collective sigh of relief swept through the camp. The travelers, their fear replaced by gratitude, crowded around Clara, their voices filled with praise. Cole, standing apart from the crowd, watched the scene unfold. He saw the way Clara's face softened as she held the boy's hand, the way her eyes shone with a quiet joy. He knew then, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he wasn't just protecting Sarah and Lily. He was protecting Clara too. He was protecting the fragile hope she represented, the hope that maybe, just maybe, even in the wild and unforgiving West, kindness and compassion could still bloom. The journey continued, the landscape growing increasingly treacherous as they approached the Black Ridge Mountains. The trail narrowed, clinging precariously to the edge of steep cliffs. The air grew thin and cold, and the wind howled through the canyons like a banshee's wail. The travelers, their nerves frayed, their bodies exhausted, pressed on, driven by the lure of gold and the desperate hope of a better life. They were unaware, however, of the danger that lurked just ahead, a danger that would test their courage and their loyalty, and forge an unlikely alliance between a silent rancher and a woman of quiet strength. The air, thin and biting, carried the scent of pine and something else, something feral and unsettling. Cole, riding slightly ahead of the wagons, felt a prickle on the back of his neck, the instinctive unease of a man who'd spent a lifetime looking over his shoulder. The canyon walls, rising sheer on either side, seemed to close in, swallowing the last rays of the setting sun. He reined in his horse, scanning the rocky outcrops above. Something wasn't right. He turned back towards the wagon train, his hand hovering over the rifle slung across his saddle. "Hold up," he called out, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Clara, riding in her small wagon near the front of the train, looked up at him, her brow furrowed with concern. Before she could question him, A volley of gunfire erupted from the rocks above, shattering the stillness of the canyon. The wagon train erupted into chaos. Horses reared, wagons lurched, and the screams of the terrified travelers mingled with the crackle of gunfire and the war whoops of the attackers. Cole, his instincts taking over, spurred his horse forward, drawing his rifle as he rode. He saw Clara jump down from her wagon, a small pistol clutched in her hand, her face a mask of grim determination. He had expected her to cower, to seek shelter, but she stood her ground, firing back at the attackers with surprising accuracy. He reached her side, his horse shielding her from the hail of bullets. "Get behind the wagons," he yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. Clara shook her head, her eyes blazing with defiance. "I can help," she shouted back, reloading her pistol with steady hands. Cole, despite the chaos swirling around them, felt a surge of admiration for her courage. He had underestimated her, dismissed her as a gentle healer. He saw now that beneath the calm exterior was a core of steel, a strength born of necessity and honed by the harsh realities of the West. He dismounted, taking cover behind a large boulder, his rifle spitting fire at the attackers. Clara, emboldened by his presence, moved alongside him, her small pistol a surprisingly effective weapon in her capable hands. The bandits, a ragged band of outlaws led by a hulking brute with a scarred face, were clearly surprised by the ferocity of their resistance. They'd expected an easy target, a group of weary travelers, ripe for the picking. They hadn't reckoned with Cole's skill with a rifle, nor with Clara's unexpected bravery. The fight raged on, the echoes of gunfire reverberating through the canyon. Cole, moving with the fluid grace of a seasoned fighter, picked off the bandits one by one. Clara, her initial nervousness replaced by a steely resolve, reloaded and fired with a precision that belied her small frame. She moved with a surprising agility, dodging bullets and using the terrain to her advantage. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back. Cole, watching her out of the corner of his eye, felt a grudging respect for her. She wasn't just a healer, she was a survivor. She was a fighter. He realized then that they were more alike than Head thought. They were both outsiders, both hardened by the harsh realities of the West, both driven by a deep-seated sense of justice. As the last of the bandits fell, the silence that descended on the canyon was almost deafening. The smoke from the gunfire hung heavy in the air, mingling with the scent of blood and gunpowder. The travelers, shaken but unharmed, emerged from their hiding places, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and relief. They looked at Cole and Clara with a newfound respect, their eyes filled with gratitude. Cole, leaning against the boulder, his chest heaving, met Clara's gaze. A flicker of something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the shared danger they'd faced, the unexpected bond forged in the heat of battle. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was something more than just respect. It was the beginning of something new, something fragile and uncertain, something that might just bloom in the desolate landscape of their hearts, as unexpected and resilient as a wildflower pushing through the cracked earth of the desert. The campfire crackled, sending sparks spiraling into the vast, inky blackness above. The desert night, stripped bare of the sun's brutal glare, held a different kind of silence. A silence filled with the whispers of the wind, the rustle of unseen creatures, and the soft murmur of the travelers settling down for the night. Cole and Clara sat apart from the others, a small fire burning between them, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. Clara poured coffee from a dented tin pot, the steam rising like a phantom in the cool night air. She handed Cole a chipped mug, their fingers brushing briefly. He nodded his thanks, the simple gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. The fight in the canyon had changed things between them. The shared danger, the adrenaline-fueled moments of reliance, had chipped away at the walls they both so carefully constructed around their hearts. "You handle a gun surprisingly well for a doctor," Cole said, the words rough around the edges, but lacking their usual bite. Clara smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "My father taught me. He believed a woman should be able to protect herself in this world." Cole grunted, taking a long sip of the hot, bitter coffee. He could picture Clara's father, a man of quiet strength, teaching his daughter how to survive in a harsh and unforgiving land. He understood that kind of love, the fierce protectiveness that came from knowing the world could be a cruel and dangerous place. "You've seen your share of trouble," Clara said, her voice soft, her gaze fixed on the dancing flames. Cole looked up at the star-strewn sky, the vastness of it mirroring the emptiness he'd carried inside him for so long. "More than my share," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He told her about the war, about the things he'd seen, the things he'd done. He told her about the loss, the guilt, the ghosts that haunted his dreams. He spoke of it haltingly, the words dredged up from the deepest recesses of his soul, each syllable a painful admission. Had never spoken of these things before, not to anyone. But under the vast, indifferent sky, with Clara's quiet presence beside him, the words seemed to flow, a torrent of pain and regret finally finding release. Clara listened patiently, her silence more comforting than any words could have been. She didn't judge, didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply listened, her presence a silent testament to the power of shared humanity. When he was finished, she told him her own story. She spoke of her father, a doctor who dedicated his life to helping others, only to be struck down by a fever during a typhoid epidemic. She spoke of her struggles to keep his clinic open, to carry on his legacy in a town that often seemed indifferent to suffering. She spoke of the loneliness, the fear, the constant battle to maintain hope in the face of adversity. As they shared their stories, the fire burned low, the embers glowing like dying stars. The desert night grew colder, but the space between them seemed to shrink, the shared vulnerability forging an invisible bond. They were two damaged souls, scarred by the harsh realities of the West, finding solace in the shared burden of their pasts. Cole looked at Clara, her face illuminated by the flickering firelight. He saw the strength in her eyes, the resilience that shone through the weariness. He saw the woman she was, not just the healer, not just the fighter, but the woman who'd faced hardship and loss, and still managed to find a flicker of hope in the darkness. He reached out, his calloused hand gently covering hers. She didn't pull away. She simply met his gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. In that moment, under the vast, indifferent sky, surrounded by the whispering silence of the desert, they found a connection, a shared understanding that transcended words. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a spark, a flicker of something bright and unexpected in the darkness, a promise of something more, something that might just bloom in the desolate landscape of their hearts. The journey to the Black Ridge, and whatever awaited them there, suddenly seemed less daunting, less lonely. They had found something precious in the shared vulnerability of their starlight confessions, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could face the shifting sands of the future together. The Black Ridge loomed closer, a jagged scar against the horizon. But the promise of gold held little sway over Sarah now. Fear for Lily, who'd developed a hacking cough, gnawed at her. The child's small chest rattled with each breath, her face flushed with fever. Sarah's fear turned to terror when Lily's breaths grew shallow, her skin clammy. Clara, her own face pale with exhaustion, examined Lily with practiced hands. "Lung fever," she murmured, her voice grim. "She needs rest, warmth, and she trailed off, her gaze meeting Cole's. He knew what she wasn't saying. Out here, in the unforgiving wilderness, Lily's chances were slim. That night, Cole kept vigil beside Lily's makeshift bed in the back of Sarah's wagon. He watched the child struggle for breath, her small body racked with coughs. He felt a helplessness he hadn't felt since the war. Head face down, enemy fire, stared death in the face. But this was different. This was a battle he couldn't fight with a gun or a knife. Then, just before dawn, it was Cole who succumbed. A wave of dizziness washed over him, followed by a bone-chilling cold that settled deep in his bones. He collapsed onto the wagon floor, his world dissolving into a feverish haze. He drifted in and out of consciousness, tormented by fragmented memories of the war. The screams of dying men, the stench of blood and gunpowder. He saw Clara's face hovering above him, her touch cool against his burning skin. He heard her voice, soft and soothing, whispering words he couldn't quite grasp. Clara barely slept. She tended to Lily during the day, then spent her nights nursing Cole. She brewed medicinal teas from the herbs she had gathered along the way, bathed his forehead with cool water, and whispered prayers for his recovery. She had seen this fever before, knew its relentless grip. She also knew that Cole's survival depended on his will to live, a will that seemed to be fading with each passing hour. Sarah, watching Clara's tireless efforts, felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This woman, this stranger, was fighting for both of them, for their small, fragile family. She saw the toll it was taking on Clara, the dark circles under her eyes, the lines of exhaustion etched around her mouth. She saw the quiet determination in her movements, the unwavering focus in her eyes. She saw, too, the flicker of something else, something that looked suspiciously like worry in Clara's gaze whenever it rested on Cole's feverish face. Days bled into nights. Lily's breathing slowly improved, her cough lessening with each passing day. But Cole remained trapped in the fever's grip, his body burning, his mind adrift in a sea of tormented memories. One night, as Clara sat beside him, her hand resting on his forehead, Cole's delirium broke. He opened his eyes, his gaze locking onto hers. He saw the worry in her eyes, the exhaustion etched on her face. He saw the compassion, the unwavering care that shone through the weariness. He reached out, his hand weakly grasping hers. "Clara," he whispered, his voice raspy. Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting in their depths. "You're awake," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Cole squeezed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," he whispered, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. Clara smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that lit up her face. "You're going to be all right, Cole," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that even she hadn't realized she possessed. And in that moment, as their hands clasped together in the dim light of the wagon, something shifted between them. The shared ordeal, the vulnerability of illness, the unwavering care and compassion, had forged a bond deeper than either of them could have imagined. It wasn't just gratitude, not just respect. It was something more, something nascent and fragile, yet undeniably real. It was the seed of something that might just bloom into something beautiful, something enduring in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of their hearts. They reached Black Ridge a week later, the landscape scarred and gouged by the relentless pursuit of gold. The air buzzed with a frenetic energy, a mix of hope and desperation that clung to the dust-laden air like a shroud. Cole, still weak from the fever, leaned heavily on his saddle, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene. Clara, riding beside him, felt a knot of unease tighten in her stomach. This wasn't the peaceful haven she had imagined. This was a place of broken dreams and shattered hopes, where greed and desperation reigned supreme. They found a small, relatively undisturbed claim near a creek, a sliver of hope in the ravaged landscape. Cole, his strength slowly returning, began the arduous task of setting up camp, while Clara tended to Lily, who was recovering but still frail. They worked in companionable silence, a quiet understanding flowing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in the crucible of shared hardship. That evening, a man rode into their camp, his horse lathered, his face grimy with dust and sweat. He introduced himself as Bart, a prospector who claimed to have been working a nearby claim for months. He was a burly man with a jovial manner and a quick smile, but his eyes held a calculating glint that made Clara uneasy. Cole, ever wary, watched him with a guarded expression. Bart offered them coffee and hardtack, sharing stories of his prospecting adventures, his tales laced with exaggerated claims of near misses and lost fortunes. He seemed eager to befriend them, to offer advice and assistance. Clara, wary but polite, listened patiently, while Cole remained silent, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames of the campfire. Over the next few days, Bart became a regular visitor to their camp. He helped Cole stake their claim, offered tips on panning for gold, and even brought them fresh game headhunted. He seemed genuinely eager to help, and Clara, despite her initial reservations, began to warm to him. Cole, however, remained skeptical, his instincts telling him that something wasn't right. One morning, Cole and Clara awoke to find their camp deserted. Bart was gone, and with him, their claim markers and the small amount of gold they'd managed to pan. The betrayal hit Clara like a physical blow. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her, followed by a surge of anger so intense it made her tremble. Cole, his face grim, cursed under his breath. Had damn well known that Bart couldn't be trusted. He looked at Clara, her face pale with shock and anger. "He played us," he said, his voice flat. Clara clenched her fists, her eyes blazing with fury. "Well, find him," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "Well, get our claim back." Cole nodded, his gaze hardening. He knew the odds were stacked against them. Bart had the advantage. He knew the terrain, and he likely had allies in this lawless land. But he also knew that he wouldn't let Clara face this alone. They'd faced hardship and danger together before, and they'd face this together too. He'd track Bart down, even if it took him to the ends of the earth. He owed Clara that much, and more. He owed her his life, and had be damned if He'd let some two-bit swindler steal her future. The quiet rage simmering within him was a cold, hard thing, and it fueled him with a grim determination. He'd get their claim back, or die trying. The trail was cold, but Cole's fury was hot. He tracked Bart through the rugged canyons and across the arid plains, his pursuit relentless, his determination unwavering. Clara, riding beside him, mirrored his grim resolve. The betrayal had hardened something within her, replacing her initial shock and anger with a cold, steely determination. She wouldn't let Bart get away with this, not after everything they'd endured. 3 days later, they found him. He'd holed up in a deserted ghost town, a cluster of crumbling buildings baking under the merciless sun. The town, once a bustling hub of activity, now stood as a testament to the fleeting nature of fortune, its empty streets whispering tales of broken dreams and shattered hopes. It was a fitting setting for a reckoning. Cole and Clara rode into town, their horses' hooves echoing through the silence. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, the silence broken only by the creak of a rusted weather vane spinning idly in the wind. They found Bart in the town's deserted saloon, his feet propped up on a table, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as they entered, his eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing into a calculating glint. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice laced with false bravado. "Look what the cat dragged in." Cole dismounted, his movements slow and deliberate, his gaze fixed on Bart. He didn't speak, his silence more menacing than any words could have been. Clara followed suit, her hand resting on the butt of her revolver. "I see you found your way back," Bart continued, his voice taking on an edge of nervousness. "What can I do for you?" Cole stepped forward, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. He stopped a few feet from Bart, the air crackling with tension. "You know what you did," he said, his voice low and dangerous. Bart chuckled, a nervous, forced sound. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his eyes darting around the room. Cole's hand moved with lightning speed, his fist connecting with Bart's jaw. Bart staggered back, his chair crashing to the floor. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes blazing with fury. He lunged at Cole, but Cole was ready. He sidestepped the attack and landed another blow, this time to Bart's gut. Bart doubled over, gasping for air. Clara watched the exchange, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen Cole like this, his movements fueled by a cold, controlled rage. He was a different man than the quiet, reserved rancher Shed met weeks ago. The hardship they'd endured, the betrayal they'd suffered, had unleashed something primal within him. Cole grabbed Bart by the collar, hauling him to his feet. "Where are our claim markers?" he growled, his voice tight with anger. Bart, his face bruised and bloody, spat at Cole's feet. "You'll never find them," he wheezed. Cole's grip tightened. "You're wrong," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I always find what I'm looking for." He threw Bart against the wall, the impact knocking the wind out of him. Clara stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Tell him, Bart," she said. "It's over." Bart, defeated and broken, finally relented. He told them where Head hidden the claim markers, his voice barely a whisper. Cole retrieved the markers, then turned back to Bart. He looked at the man, his face a mask of disgust. He wanted it to hurt him, to make him pay for what Head done. But he knew that violence wouldn't solve anything. It would bring back the trust they'd lost. It wouldn't erase the betrayal. He turned and walked out of the saloon, Clara following close behind. They mounted their horses and rode out of the ghost town, leaving Bart to the silence and the ghosts of his own making. The sun beat down on their backs, the dust swirling around them as they rode. They didn't speak. The silence filled with unspoken understanding. They'd faced hardship and betrayal, and they'd emerged stronger, their bond forged in the crucible of shared experience. The black ridge still loomed ahead, a symbol of the uncertain future that awaited them. But they would face it together, their shared strength, a shield against the harsh realities of the West. They rode in silence, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. The black ridge, a jagged scar on the horizon, seemed to mirror the raw edges of their emotions. The confrontation with Bart had left them shaken, the violence a stark reminder of the brutal realities of their world. Clara, despite her outward stoicism, was deeply troubled. She had seen a darkness in Cole's eyes that frightened her, a cold fury she hadn't witnessed before. She understood it, the rage born of betrayal, but it worried her nonetheless. As they neared their camp, a sudden volley of gunshots shattered the stillness. Clara's horse reared, throwing her to the ground. Cole, reacting instantly, drew his revolver and spurred his horse towards the camp, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw 3 figures on horseback, their faces masked by bandanas, firing indiscriminately at the wagon. Lily, died. The thought sliced through him like a knife. He returned fire, his shots precise and deadly, forcing the bandits to take cover. He dismounted, using his horse as a shield, and edged closer to the wagon, scanning the scene for any sign of Lily or Clara. He saw Clara lying motionless near the overturned wagon, her body partially obscured by the swirling dust. Panic clawed at his throat. "Clara!" he roared, his voice raw with fear. He raced towards her, dodging another volley of gunfire. He reached her side, dropping to his knees beside her. He gently rolled her over, his heart stopping in his chest. A crimson stain bloomed on her shirt, spreading across the fabric like a dark flower. "Clara," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He cradled her in his arms, his gaze searching her face. Her eyes fluttered open, her gaze meeting his. A faint smile touched her lips. "Cole," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't talk," he said, his voice thick with tears. "Save your strength." She reached up, her hand weakly grasping his. "Lily," she whispered, her voice fading. Cole's gaze shifted towards the wagon. He saw Lily huddled inside, her face pale with fear, but unharmed. Relief washed over him, followed by a wave of grief, so intense it threatened to drown him. Clara's grip tightened on his hand, then went slack. Her eyes closed, her breathing ceasing. The life drained from her face, leaving behind an expression of serene peace. Cole held her close, his body racked with sobs. Head failed her. Head brought her into this dangerous world, and now she had paid the ultimate price. The rage Head felt earlier was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness, a bone-deep sorrow that gnawed at his soul. Head lost her. Head lost the woman who'd shown him kindness and compassion, the woman who'd nursed him back to health, the woman who'd become his anchor in the storm. Head lost the woman He'd come to love. He gently laid Clara's body down, his gaze fixed on her peaceful face. He rose to his feet, his movements stiff and mechanical. He walked towards the wagon, his eyes burning with unshed tears. He lifted Lily into his arms, holding her close, her small body trembling against his. He looked back at Clara, a silent promise forming in his heart. He would protect Lily. He would raise her, teach her, love her. He would honor Clara's memory by giving Lily the life she deserved, a life free from the violence and hardship that had claimed her mother. The black ridge loomed in the distance, a stark reminder of the unforgiving landscape they inhabited. But as Cole held Lily close, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He would survive this. He would endure. For Lily. For Jedediah. He would face the future, whatever it held, with the quiet strength and unwavering determination that had defined the woman he loved. He would carry her memory with him, a beacon in the darkness, guiding him through the trials and tribulations that lay ahead. He would make her proud. He scooped Clara into his arms, her body alarmingly light. Lily, her face streaked with tears and dust, watched him with wide, frightened eyes. He wrapped her in a blanket, settled her in the wagon, and climbed up beside her, his movements driven by a desperate urgency. He lashed the horses, the wagon lurching forward, its wheels bouncing over the rough terrain. The black ridge, now bathed in the pale light of the rising moon, seemed to mock his frantic efforts. The nearest town with a doctor was Silver Creek, a 2-day ride under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. Clara was losing blood, her breathing shallow and ragged. He had to get her there faster. He pushed the horses harder, their hooves pounding a relentless rhythm against the hard-packed earth, a desperate drumbeat against the silence of the night. The landscape blurred into a series of fleeting images, twisted Joshua trees, clawing at the moonlit sky, jagged rock formations, silhouetted against the horizon, the endless expanse of the desert, stretching out before him like a vast, unforgiving ocean. The rhythmic creak of the wagon wheels, The steady beat of the horse's hooves, the rasp of Clara's breath, these were the only sounds in the vast emptiness, a symphony of desperation echoing through the night. He glanced down at Clara, his heart constricting with each shallow breath she took. Her face, pale and drawn, was etched with pain. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her forehead, his fingers lingering on her cool skin. He had to get her to Silver Creek. He had to. The night wore on, the moon a silent witness to his desperate race against time. The horses, lathered and exhausted, began to falter. He urged them on, his voice hoarse, his body aching with fatigue. He couldn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Clara's life depended on it. As dawn broke, painting the eastern sky in hues of pink and orange, he saw at the faint outline of Silver Creek in the distance, a cluster of buildings huddled at the base of a towering mesa. Hope surged through him, a fragile flame flickering in the darkness of his despair. He reached the town, the horses collapsing in their harnesses, their bodies heaving with exhaustion. He leapt from the wagon, his legs unsteady beneath him. He scooped Clara into his arms and stumbled towards the nearest building, a weathered sign proclaiming it to be the town's doctor's office. He burst through the doors, his voice echoing through the small, sparsely furnished room. "Help!" he cried, his voice raw with desperation. "Please, someone help her." A grizzled old man, his face lined and weathered, emerged from a back room, his eyes widening in alarm as he took in the scene. He quickly ushered Cole into an examining room, his movements brisk and efficient. He examined Clara, his face grim, his touch gentle. Cole watched him, his heart pounding in his chest, his hopes hanging precariously on the doctor's words. The silence stretched, each tick of the clock amplifying his anxiety. Finally, the doctor straightened up, his gaze meeting Cole's. "The bullet grazed her lung," he said, his voice grave. "She's lost a lot of blood. It's a bad wound." Cole's stomach lurched. "Can you save her?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor hesitated, his gaze searching Cole's face. "I can try," he said, his voice laced with uncertainty. "But I can't make any promises." The doctor's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Cole stared at him, his mind reeling, his body numb with shock. Had raced against time, pushed himself and his horses to their limits, only to be met with this devastating prognosis. He sank onto a nearby chair, his gaze fixed on the floor, the rough wooden planks blurring through his tears. "She needs rest," the doctor said, his voice gentler now, laced with a weary compassion. "And Shell needs someone to tend to her." "Are you her husband?" Cole shook his head, the word catching in his throat. "Husband." The word echoed the unspoken feelings had harbored for Clara, feelings had kept buried beneath layers of stoicism and reserve. Had never allowed himself to fully acknowledge the depth of his affection for her. The way her quiet strength and unwavering spirit had drawn him in. The way her gentle touch had soothed his wounded soul. Now faced with the possibility of losing her, the dam of his emotions threatened to burst. "No," he finally managed, his voice hoarse. "But I care for her." The doctor nodded, his gaze understanding. Had seen this before, the unspoken language of the heart revealed in the face of loss. "Then stay with her," he said, his voice firm. "She'll need you." Cole remained by Clara's side, watching over her as she drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow, her face pale and drawn. He bathed her forehead with cool water, his touch gentle, his heart aching with each labored breath she took. He whispered words of comfort, words of hope, though he knew not whether she could hear him. He thought of Lily, waiting outside in the wagon, her small face etched with worry. Had promised Clara he would protect her, and he would. But right now, his focus was on Clara, on the woman who had become so much more to him than just a companion on a perilous journey. The doctor returned periodically, checking Clara's vital signs, his expression grim. He administered what little medicine he had, but the outcome remained uncertain. "She's fighting," he told Cole, his voice low. "But it's a hard fight." The hours stretched into an eternity, each moment a torturous blend of hope and despair. Cole remained by Clara's side, his hand clasped in hers, her weak grip a lifeline in the storm of his emotions. He prayed for her recovery, prayed for a miracle, though he knew that miracles were rare in this harsh and unforgiving land. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the small room, Clara stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, her gaze focusing on Cole. A faint smile touched her lips. "Cole," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. He leaned closer, his heart soaring with a fragile hope. "I'm here, Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." She reached up, her hand weakly caressing his cheek. "Lily," she whispered, her voice fading. "She's safe," he assured her, his voice choked with tears. "She's waiting for you." Clara's gaze held his for a moment longer, a silent exchange of unspoken emotions. Then her eyes closed, her breathing becoming shallow once more. Cole held her close, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. He didn't know if she would open her eyes again, if she would ever speak his name again. He only knew that he couldn't bear the thought of losing her. Had faced hardship and betrayal, had endured the brutal realities of the West, but nothing had prepared him for the agonizing pain of watching the woman he loved slip away. He pressed his forehead against hers, whispering a silent prayer, a desperate plea for a miracle in a land where miracles were few and far between. The days that followed were a blur of anxious waiting and whispered prayers. Cole rarely left Clara's side, tending to her needs with a tenderness that surprised even himself. Had lived a solitary life, hardened by years of hardship and betrayal, but Clara's vulnerability had chipped away at his rough exterior, revealing a wellspring of compassion he hadn't known he possessed. He fetched water from the well, bathed her feverish brow, and spooned broth into her mouth, his touch gentle, his gaze unwavering. Lily, initially shy and withdrawn, began to warm to him, her small hand often reaching for his, her presence a silent comfort in the hushed room. The doctor, a man of few words but immense skill, visited regularly, his gruff exterior hiding a genuine concern for his patients. Had seen too much death in his years practicing medicine in the rough-and-tumble town of Silver Creek, but Clara's tenacity, her sheer will to live, impressed him. "She's a fighter," Ed grumbled, his voice laced with a grudging admiration. "Got more grit than most men I know." And Clara did fight. Slowly, agonizingly, she began to recover. The fever broke, the color returned to her cheeks, and her breathing grew stronger. One morning, she opened her eyes and smiled at Cole, a genuine smile that reached her eyes and warmed him to the core. "Lily, blah," she whispered, her voice still weak but clear. Cole brought Lily to her bedside, the little girl's face lighting up as she saw her mother awake. Clara reached out, her hand trembling, and gently stroked Lily's hair, her touch a silent affirmation of their bond. In that moment, Cole felt a shift within him, a profound sense of connection to these two women who had unwittingly softened his hardened heart. The prejudice had carried for so long, the bitterness that had festered within him, began to dissolve, replaced by a nascent sense of hope, a belief in the possibility of redemption. He began to open up to Clara, sharing fragments of his past, the painful memories had kept buried for so long. He told her about the betrayal that had driven him into the wilderness, the loss that had shaped him into the hardened man had become. Clara listened patiently, her gaze unwavering, her silence a balm to his wounded soul. She didn't judge him, didn't offer platitudes or empty promises. She simply listened, her presence a quiet testament to the healing power of empathy. As Clara gained her strength, so too did Cole's resolve to build a better life for them. He found work in Silver Creek, helping a local rancher mend fences and tend to the cattle. The work was hard, the days long, but he didn't complain. He had a purpose now, a reason to keep going. He was providing for Clara and Lily, creating a stable home for them, a haven from the harsh realities of the West. Had never considered himself a family man, but as he watched Clara and Lily together, their laughter echoing through their small rented cabin, he felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. Had come to Silver Creek, seeking refuge, a place to hide from his past, but had found something far more valuable, a future. A future he never would have imagined possible, a future filled with the promise of love, family, and the quiet redemption of a wounded soul. The West remained wild, untamed, a land of hardship and uncertainty, but within the confines of their small cabin, a fragile sense of peace had taken root, a testament to the enduring power of hope and the transformative power of love. The Black Ridge still loomed on the horizon, a stark reminder of the trials they'd endured. But now, it no longer seemed a symbol of despair, but rather a testament to their resilience, a silent witness to the strength they'd found in each other. They had faced the darkness, and they had emerged, scarred but unbroken, into the fragile light of a new dawn. The return to Harmony Gulch was a journey fraught with unspoken anxieties. The dust devils danced across the parched landscape, mirroring the turmoil in Cole's gut. He glanced at Clara, seated beside him on the wagon seat, Lily nestled asleep in her lap. Clara's face, once pale and drawn, now held a healthy glow, her eyes reflecting a quiet strength that resonated deep within him. Had confessed everything to her during those long nights in Silver Creek. The betrayal, the bitterness, the reasons Had sought refuge in the wilderness. Shed listened without judgment, her silence a testament to the depth of her understanding. Had revealed the man he truly was, stripped bare of pretense and hardened defenses, and Shed accepted him, flaws and all. That acceptance, more than anything, had begun to heal the wounds Had carried for so long. Harmony Gulch hadn't changed. The same dusty streets, the same weathered buildings, the same wary glances from the townsfolk. But Cole had changed. He no longer felt the weight of their judgment, the sting of their whispers. He held his head high, his gaze steady, his hand resting protectively on the rifle beside him. He wasn't running anymore. He was coming home. He drove the wagon straight to the sheriff's office, Clara and Lily following close behind. Sheriff Brody, a stout man with a walrus mustache and a perpetually skeptical expression, emerged from the building, his eyes narrowing as he recognized Cole. "Back, are ya?" he grunted, his voice laced with suspicion. "Back," Cole affirmed, his voice quiet but firm. He met the sheriff's gaze, his own unwavering. "To stay." He told the sheriff what had happened, the attempted robbery, the flight to Silver Creek, Clara's near-fatal wound. He didn't embellish, didn't try to justify his actions. He simply stated the facts, his voice devoid of emotion. The sheriff listened, his expression softening as Cole spoke. Had known Cole's father, a respected rancher who'd been unjustly accused and lynched years ago. Had seen the bitterness and anger fester in Cole, driving him away from Harmony Gulch. But the man standing before him now was different. He saw a quiet strength in Cole's eyes, a sense of purpose he hadn't seen before. "Glad to hear Clara's all right," Brody said, his voice gruff but sincere. He glanced at Lily, clinging to Clara's skirt, her small face filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. And the little one, too. Cole nodded, his gaze softening as he looked at Clara and Lily. They were his family now, his reason for being. He would protect them, provide for them, build a life for them here in Harmony Gulch, a life free from fear and prejudice. He bought a small plot of land on the outskirts of town, a dilapidated cabin nestled amongst a grove of cottonwood trees. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. He repaired the roof, reinforced the walls, and built a small porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. He planted a small garden, the green shoots a testament to his newfound hope. Life wasn't easy. The land was unforgiving, the winters harsh, but they persevered. Clara, with her quiet strength and unwavering spirit, became a pillar of the small community, offering comfort and support to those in need. Lily, blossoming under their care, brought laughter and joy to their lives. And Cole, once a solitary figure haunted by his past, found solace in the love of these two women, a love that had transformed him from a hardened outcast into a man of quiet dignity and unwavering resolve. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Clara reached for Cole's hand, her touch gentle, her gaze filled with a quiet understanding. "We're home, Cole," she whispered, her voice soft as the evening breeze. He looked at her, his heart swelling with a love he had never thought possible. He looked at Lily, her small hand clasped in his, her face radiating a pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at the small cabin, the garden, the vast expanse of the west stretching out before them. He was home. They were home. And in that moment, as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, he knew that even in the wild, untamed heart of the West, there was a place for hope, a place for healing.